Welcome to Powerless Penguins United. This week I'm pleased to introduce Max, who has kindly come along to share her experience on There Is a Solution, I believe, and we're on page 25, Max, at the bottom.
That's correct. Thank you, Lois, for your service, and to Matt and Michelle and Kira and Mark, everybody who's jumped in this morning. There's nothing like technology. I love a bit of it. I know over the last couple of weeks, I've had to dip out because my internet was lagging too. So if it happens, we know the drill. We come straight back to it. So thank you everybody, for your service and for making this meeting happen 6 days a week. It's great to be here on a beautiful Saturday. Happy Saturday, everybody. The weather's glorious in this part of the world where I am, which is unusual. But it's great to be here with all of you. Like Lois said, we're at the bottom of page 25. So if you've got your big book in front of you, it might be helpful for you to have a look through it whilst we're doing this. It's a big book study, so a big book would be helpful. And if you haven't got one, then we'll get you one. Just pop your details in the chat to somebody and that'll all get sorted out. So we're going to set aside every single thing we think we know this morning about everything. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. We just know we need to set aside every single thing we think we know about this particular part of the book that we're going to go through in order for us to have a new experience with God. If you don't know what God is, if you don't have a God, if you have an aversion to God, set it all aside. What you think you know in order to have the new experience with God. That's the instruction. And with my sponsor, I just followed the instructions even though I didn't know why. And here we are, doing what he gave to me, which is amazing. To be able to carry this message on to this group of people who are so committed to carrying the message and helping alcoholics and addicts. And to those that are returning, welcome back. Just, I say this a lot, don't just keep coming back. Why don't you just stay? Because there's nowhere else for you to go. This is where you're going to find the solution to what you suffer from, and that solution will change your life beyond anything of your expectations. So we're at the bottom of page 25. We've been at the bottom of page 25 for a couple of weeks, actually. It's quite funny, really. Last week we covered the spiritual experience, but I'm bringing you back to the bottom of page 25 because we've got one word to read on that page. The word this. So the bottom of page 25, we're saying this. On to page 26, we did because we honestly wanted to. And we're willing to make the effort. So what's the context of that? This we did because we honestly wanted to and we're willing to make the effort. Well, we wanted to accept the spiritual help. Like it says at the last line at the bottom of page 25. If you're sitting in this room or listening to the recording and you have done from previous weeks, we've covered the spiritual experience. You can find that on page 567 at the back of the book, Appendix 2. Very easy page to remember, 567, 568. It runs into page 568. Anyway, Appendix 2 is what you're looking for. But before we did that appendix, we started to understand the fact that we could go on blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation that you're currently sitting in, or you can accept the spiritual help. Those are the two alternatives you have. Right now in this chapter, you already know that you have no power, no choice, no control over whatever it is that you're using, alcohol, drugs, whatever. You've got no power, no choice, no control, and it's all three. We've covered that in previous weeks. So if you still think you've got control, power and choice, okay, great. You can go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation that you're in, or you can accept the spiritual help. And you might be wondering, well, what on earth is this crazy person talking about in regards to the spiritual help? Don't worry about that. We're going to find out. That's why you need a sponsor. That's why you need to work through the big book. We're at the point in the book where we're really getting into the mental obsession. Page 23 to page 43 in the big book focuses on the mental obsession. We've already covered the physical allergy in the doctor's opinion, but right now we're talking about the fact that this illness that we have centers in our mind. The mental obsession being this total and utter preoccupation with a totally and utterly unreasonable idea that it's okay for you to use once and it's okay for you to pick up one drink, when it's not okay to do that. Because you suffer from an allergy that once you put one drink in, once you put one drink in, it sets off the phenomenon of craving, it sets off the allergy, that it manifests itself in the phenomenon of craving. So that's why you don't pick up. And when we stop putting it in, we have this mental obsession. The way that it worked for me, and many, if not all of my sponsees, is when I stopped the drinking, I was continuing to think about drinking every single second of the day. That was the mental obsession. I don't have that mental obsession anymore. That has been removed. Like it says at the beginning of this chapter, it has been removed. The drink problem has been solved. Past tense. And they're talking about this honesty and the willingness to make the effort. These 12 steps, it takes effort. Last week in the spiritual experience, we talked about the essential requirements that are completely and utterly indispensable. The willingness, the honesty, the open-mindedness. Willingness, bearing in mind the part of the book that we're in, is the only way that I can describe it is I'm not opposed to, in my mind, I'm not opposed to getting up on a Saturday morning to do this with you. I'm willing to do this. Not opposed to in mind. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And in any given day, sometimes all I have is willingness. And that is the foundation that can get me into the next day, the next day, the next day, and the next day. All I have to have is this willingness and honesty with myself. Step one is an honesty with myself that I am keeping an open mind. So step one, we admit it. We let the idea in that we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. I've got to get honest with myself about what's going on in my life and the impact that this alcohol and drugs is having on me. The honesty with the outside world, whatever that means, will come. But in order to diagnose myself, which is the point of step one as is outlined in the book later on, and I'm not going to jump to that part of the book because you know that I always say we grow where we're planted. The honesty about the illness that I suffer from is to myself. And in actual fact, what prevented me from getting this solution in the beginning was I couldn't admit to everybody outside that I was an alcoholic addict. But that doesn't matter. I was never going to be able to admit to them because I couldn't admit it to myself. So the honesty, the willingness, the honesty, and the open-mindedness are the essential requirements, not just for you today, but for the rest of our lives. We have this daily reprieve that we get later on in our 10, 11, and 12. Again, we'll talk about that when we get to that point. Now we're going to go into this little story. It's a real life story. May not be in exact detail, but what we're doing when we're in this story is understanding from this individual's perspective, is the same thing happening with me? We're identifying, is this me? Is this me? Is this me? So this is the story of a certain American businessman, that being Roland Hazard. Roland Hazard we were first introduced to on page 9 within Bill's story. He's the guy who went to the court and in a very matter-of-fact way persuaded the judge to release Ebby Thatcher into his hands so that he can provide him with a practical programme of action. It's the bottom paragraph on page 9 is where we were first introduced to Roland Hazard, and he went along to the court with another gentleman called Cipro Greaves to get him released. And within 2 months, Ebby Thatcher was sitting at the kitchen table with Bill, carrying the message, the solution as to how he could overcome his alcoholism. But this is Roland's story up to this, at this point. So a certain American businessman had ability, good sense and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, the one and only, Dr. Young, Carl Jung, who prescribed for him. Isn't that incredible? The story goes that Roland Hazard went to Switzerland and spent an entire year with Carl Jung, the best known psychiatrist in the world still to this day, to help him overcome his drink problem. And though the experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Remember, in step 1, we're understanding the physical and the mental side of the illness that we suffer from. So Carl Jung has told him all about the physical and mental condition, and he was in usually good spirits here. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Imagine that. Imagine going and spending a whole year with a psychiatrist, the best in the world, and coming back and you're no further forward. Like, can you imagine what that would have been like for him? Now, in today's monetary terms, Roland Hazard would have been an exceptionally rich man. No amount of money could pay for him to get the best medical care for his illness to be overcome. On page 22, it talks about, we will never get a full answer. We cannot answer the riddle. We cannot answer the riddle as to why I drank and used like I did and somebody else didn't drink and use the way that I did. But yet we're still here and we still have the same illness. We still have the allergy. We still have the mental obsession. He could give no satisfactory explanation for his fall. He knew every single piece of the inner workings of his mind. He had such profound knowledge, but he still couldn't understand and overcome the drink thing. What's that all about? And that's why, for me, in my experience, my knowledge of this big book is not enough. The knowledge is important. It's important to go through it with a sponsor so that they can explain in layman's terms from their own bitter experience. The ex-problem drinker, armed with the facts about how they had the spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, it's incredibly important. But what we also have to have is the experience. The reality of it is me rocking up here every Saturday, telling you the page numbers, linking it to the previous page number, giving you the odd definition here and there. That's not what is going to enable you to have the psychic change. That's not what's going to enable you to have the personality change. You actually have to experience this. Now that might not make sense at this moment in time, but set aside every single thing you think you know to have the new experience with God, because that's your solution. Like it says, the spiritual toolkit that is laid at our feet, that's what you have to experience. But in order to access that, you need to understand the principles, and that's the point of the book. It tells us later on, lack of power is our dilemma. Well, where are we to find that power? Well, that's exactly the purpose of the book. But knowledge by itself will not keep me away from drinking drugs. It's an important part, but in and of itself, coming to big book studies and listening to somebody like me isn't enough. And you can't do it by yourself. The same applied to Roland Hazard. Like everybody on this screen, he was a very intelligent man, but he couldn't stop the return. So what did he do? He then returned to the doctor, Carl Jung, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. Look at those words, why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. There's that word again. We know it's mentioned so many times up to this point in the book. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. Of course he did. Yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? I've just alluded to it, page 22. We may never get a full answer. We cannot answer that riddle. We have no control. And if you think you do still have control, set that aside, people. Like it says in Bill's story, when he was going through the process, the progression of his illness, he talked about the fact that I still thought I had control. Remember, we're talking here about the mind. We're talking about the illness that's centered in our mind. We already know that from previous pages. We're talking about the mental obsession. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. This is what the best psychiatrist in the world told him. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless, beyond medical aid. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was Carl Jung's opinion. Isn't that unbelievable? So all of us here on this screen, in Carl Jung's opinion, should be locked up. Get a bodyguard if we expected to live long in this world. Can you imagine if that was our remedy? Can you imagine if that was our solution? And it is the example that Dr. Silkworth also gives in the doctor's opinion, that the message to the alcoholic must have depth and weight. We're either going to die, we are going to be locked up, or we're going to go insane. Because without the substance that we're using, whether that be drugs or alcohol, we will think that we're going insane because we haven't got another solution to replace it. You might be sitting here in this room or listening to this now and thinking, because it was mine. Alcohol and drugs were my solution. Up to a certain point, until they turned on me like a boomerang and almost cut me to shreds. Something happened at some point when it changed. But here's the thing. What happened? This man still lives and is a free man. Important to recognize here, though, that he's not just free from drugs and alcohol. He's a free man. Free from so much more than that. And what this program of action and this program of recovery gives us a way of living, a design for living that solves all our problems. We know that from page 13 at the bottom of Bill's story. It solves all our problems. I can go anywhere on this planet a free person. Because what I've been given is a spiritual toolkit that is laid at my feet that enables me to be given this power to overcome whatever little thing that might crop up in my day that previously would have caused me huge angstiness, anxiety, fear, whatever. I don't have that to the extent that I used to. In fact, there's many occasions I don't have any of that at all. I'm so free from the impact of all of the external factors that used to be the driving nature, the driving force of how I existed. So he is a free man. He doesn't need a bodyguard. People, you don't need a bodyguard. Isn't that good? Thank God for that, because I wouldn't have been able to afford that bill. Nor do I need to be locked up. I don't need to be confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster. All those little disasters that might be happening in your life right now, they might feel like disasters, but they won't be like that as we move forward with the sponsor and have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. But there's a little condition here, a little condition. You can move around this world without disaster, provided we remain willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Every single day, I maintain, to the best of my ability, this certain simple attitude. It is so simple, I could complicate the life clean out of it. But that's why my sponsor brings me back to the clear-cut directions every single time. I am willing to show up. We talked about this previously, I think, this certain simple attitude. So an airplane, a pilot will fly an airplane at altitude. There's a little dial in the cockpit which is about the attitude, and that is the position to the horizon that the plane is travelling to. That's the destination. So I have to maintain this certain simple attitude every single day, which is my destination. So whilst I'm in step 1 right now, this certain simple attitude every single day keeps me working towards moving forward to my destination, which is to have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps. That's where my attitude takes me to. That's my direction of travel. Every single day, now that I am a recovered alcoholic, I can see that my little thing is lagging now. I think I might get cut off here. Tell me that you can still hear me. Perfect, laws. Something happens when I come to the little penguin Saturday thing. The little gremlins get in somewhere. Please keep telling me that you can hear me. Yeah, perfect. So every single day now that I have had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, I maintain this certain simple attitude. My direction of travel every single day is my daily reprieve. That's all I've got to do, but it takes practice. And to maintain something is about continuing to keep it alive. That's all we have to do every day. Keep this alive, keep it in existence. And the directions enable me to know how to do that. I heard a little thing, and I've used it at a couple of meetings this week at my home group, and it talks about the fact that, you know, there might be people sitting in this room that are returning. And whether you've been away from alcohol and drugs for a period of time or not, you might only be new about, you might be returning, whatever. Doesn't matter your circumstance. But you might feel as if like there's a load of disasters going on in your life. And the thing about it is that the only way that we are introduced to this divine intervention, as we call it, the only way that this is happening for us is through these really ordinary and extraordinary experiences. It doesn't matter whether they're ordinary or extraordinary. We're introduced to this power that is greater than ourselves through these experiences, and you're going through them right now. You might think you're in an absolute disaster in your life right now, and that might be relevant to you. And that's cool if it's relevant to you right now. But know that there's something else happening as you're going through these pages. Like these clusters of disaster, they happen over a remarkably short period of time. And inevitably, those little cluster of disasters that you think that you're going through right now, in your using, losing your family, losing the job, not being able to make ends meet with your money or whatever. Whatever it might be, you might be in ill health. You know that you can't do this by yourself, but what are you going to do about it? It feels as if your life is imploding. Everything's falling down around you. But the reality of it is those remarkably short periods of time living within those disasters realistically are taking you and rerouting your life to something else. Honestly, that is my experience. So we got to set aside every single thing we think we know about all of the bad things that are happening in our life and actually say, do you know what? Maybe there's something else going on here. You're being rerouted. And in this step one experience, we're starting to understand that the life that we're currently living in is the one that needs to be given up in order for you to get the one that's waiting for you. Because there is a solution. But I've got to let the idea in my step one experience that I'm powerless. Physically, mentally, that's the first half of the first step. The second half of the first step is my life has become unmanageable due to my powerlessness. Even today, as I sit here in my little kitchen, I'm powerless over everything. My knowledge is not going to fix this. And it goes on to say, some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Well, you got to knock that one on the head. Because you can't. You do have the two alternatives, blotting out the consciousness of the intolerable situation or accept the spiritual help. But really, I would strongly suggest that you accept the spiritual help. It's the easier, softer route. You cannot do without it. That's what this program is telling you. It's a practical program of action. And irrespective of whether you believe you have this power in your life or not, it doesn't really matter at this point. Because what we're trying to understand is what our illness is. But let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. So, this on page 27, a really important part of the book. This is where Carl Jung describes what he believes the spiritual experience to be. So on page 25, we've already heard about what the first 100 who wrote the book, what their thought is around the spiritual experience, that they absolutely have had a revolutionized thinking about their whole attitude toward life, towards our fellows, towards God's universe. They absolutely believe the central fact of their lives that their Creator has entered into their heart and lives in them in a way that is miraculous. That's their description of the spiritual experience. Carl Jung's description of the spiritual experience is on page 27. Note that on this page, they also refer for amplification to see Appendix 2 at the back of the book. They told us that first on page 25. They're reminding us on page 27, don't go past without reading the spiritual experience. And they remind us a third time later on in the book, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So the doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. This illness centers in our mind. I've never seen one single case recover where the state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. Now this will apply to you. We don't compare. You might not think you're as bad as Roland Hazard. You might not think you're as bad as Fitzmayo, who we talked about in the doctor's opinion. You might not think you're as bad as Hank Parkhurst. You might not think you're as bad as the people who you're reading the personal stories from the back of the book. Set it all aside. Because the reality of it is, if you're sitting in this room, you're coming to these meetings for a reason. You can't stop picking up and using. There might be something going on in your mind that makes you completely and utterly different to everybody else on this planet. You got to let the idea in that you have an abnormal mind in your reaction to alcohol and drugs. I'm a really, really normal, boring person, but I have a completely and utterly abnormal reaction to drugs and alcohol. Completely and utterly abnormal. To the extent that I'm insane, that I think I can still pick up. Until I get the solution. So, Roland Hazard is asking, is there exception? Here's Carl Jung's description of the spiritual experience. Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to such cases as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. Vital meaning life-giving. Life-giving spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomenal. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Those words are really important. We covered off last week in the spiritual experience. This is all about change. 8 times in the spiritual experience, it talked about the word change. Huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. This is going to be a big deal. But the reality of it is, you ain't doing it by yourself. You ain't doing it by yourself. Here's the next thing. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. This is what happens when we have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, when we experience these spiritual experiences. Absolutely, these things that were once our guiding forces are completely and utterly cast to one side. And get this, a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. As a result of having this spiritual experience, as a result of having this spiritual awakening, as a result of the steps, I am no longer guided in my mind by my emotions. I've got a set of tools that enable me to set those things aside to have the new experience with God. The completely new set of conceptions, spiritual conceptions and motives, helping others, begins to dominate them. I have a change in attitude. I'm no longer driven by the fear, the emotions of fear, of jealousy, of anger, etc., etc., etc. All of those emotions. I've got a set of spiritual tools that enable me to overcome those things in any given second of the day. Genuinely, to the best of my human ability. That's what happens with this power. And my motives in life are about my purpose in carrying the message to the still sick and suffering alcoholic addict. Page 20, the top line, the top paragraph, the end of it. As an ex-problem drinker, my very life depends upon my constant thought of others. That's my motives. That's what dominates my life right now. My constant thought of others. Over 52 times in this book, it tells us that, over 52, that was a random number, wasn't it? It tells us about how we become useful. What my purpose is to be useful to those around me, my fellows and everybody in my life. And he goes on to say, in fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. That word's really important. Emotional rearrangement within you. Remember, the spiritual experience told us last week that we're tapping into this unsuspected inner resource. It might be unsuspected to you right now, but it's in there. And what we're going to do with your sponsor is to tap into it. With many individuals and methods these methods I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Now, that was his experience at that time. But don't compare yourself to what he's saying in that line. Don't think that you're never going to be successful because you're different to everybody sitting in this room. Because remember the spiritual experience, and this is why it's important to read it again, and that's why they say for amplification, that little asterisk, go back to it. You will be successful as long as you keep your mind open to all spiritual concepts. That's what it tells us in the appendix. No one need have difficulty with the spirituality of this program. No one. That's what it tells us. And I can tell you now from the bottom of my heart, that is my experience, my own personal experience and my experience with bringing sponsees through this book. All I do with all of the people that we do this with is I take them by the hand and place their hand into the hand of the God of their understanding through a very simple, practical program of action. So remember page 27, remember Carl Jung, remember what he's saying. As we move forward with this solution, we get rid of the mental obsession. It is taken away. And we go on to have a different type of life where we are no longer driven by our emotions. We have this certain simple attitude that enables us to change everything, that solves all our problems. But of course, there's a little bit of doubt then from Roland Hazard. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary, vital spiritual experience. Vital, again, being life-giving spiritual experience. So what we're saying here is, if you are a religious person, set aside every single thing you think you know about that. This is not a religious program. It's a spiritual program. Page 28, here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. You might be sitting here thinking, my religion is really, really, really strong. I'm practicing and practicing and practicing. I do everything that religion tells me. Great, but that is not helping you right now. Something else is required. And to have that willingness and honesty to keep an open mind to the fact that something else may be required at this time is so essential. That's not to say that religion will become important to you going forward. Absolutely, it might do. But right now, it's not working for you. So you've got to tap into something else. And that's what the book enables you to do. And this paragraph is so unbelievable. The words of this are just so powerful. So this man is walking the planet, a free man. people are seeing that this is happening. There's more and more recoveries of the people that are living this way and taking on board this practical program of action. And through those demonstrations, more people then started to want to get this solution. And they go on to say, we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. You don't sit about in the meetings and wait for years to do the steps and get the knowledge and understand the pages and no, that sponsor won't work for me because they don't live in the same area and they don't have the same job and I don't think I really like them too much. Actually, their big book message is kind of hacking me off a little bit, so I don't want to hang out with them. I'm just going to wait for a while. No. The instruction is you get the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. I know a couple of times I've been caught in a couple of little situations where I've been swimming in water and I thought, oh my God, I'm getting in trouble here. The waves are going to take me down. Like the desperation of a drowning man, did I want to get myself out of there? Absolutely, I did. And that's the desperation that I had here in the end to get out of the intolerable situation that I was in. But here's the thing. This is the beauty of this program and where it takes us to in understanding this. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. You might be holding on to something ever so flimsy. You might be holding on to the fact if I just get to this meeting today, I'm going to be okay. You might just be thinking, if I speak to another fellow today, they're going to talk and tell me something that will be useful. You might be thinking today, do you know what, if I get to that meeting at 7:30 tonight, that means I'm nearly through the day and then I can go to bed. What seemed at first a flimsy reed will prove to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Because you've shown up here this morning for a reason. You've shown up to listen to this for a reason. You've shown up this morning because there's something inside you that's telling you, in spite of you, that there's something here that you want, that there's something here that you need, that there's something within you that needs to change, and that there is a desire for that change to take place. What seemed at first a flimsy reed is and is proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. All your sponsor's there to do is to take your hand and place it into the hand of the God of your own understanding. And in doing that, a new life has been given us. It's been given to me. It's literally been handed to me when I show up and do what is suggested. When I say yes to service, when I say yes to my sponsor, when I say yes to helping people, when I say yes to doing a reading, when I say yes to be co-hosting, when I say yes to hosting, when I say yes, the aggregate of all of those yeses adds up to a new way of life that has been given to me almost on a plate, and I didn't even realize the change was coming over me. And not only can it be described as a new way of life, If you prefer, it goes on to say it's a design for living. That really works. We heard that line first on page 15 in Bill's story, a design for living that really works in rough going. He was talking about sponsorship. I have a design for living that works in really rough going, in all sorts of circumstances, when I sponsor other people, when I carry the message, when I practice these principles in all of my affairs. This life has been given to me in all its glory, in all its light, because I did what was suggested, and it is ready and waiting for you. Remember, and I'm going to finish on this because we are in There Is a Solution. All of the disasters that you think are happening to you, all of the things that you think that you're losing, all of the things that you think you don't have, all of the things that you would like to have and aren't coming your way, all of those disasters, literally over a short period of time, are rerouting your life somewhere else. It's time now to give up the life you have right now, to get the one that's waiting for you. The flimsy reed is no longer going to be flimsy. It is the powerful and loving hand of God. I'll leave it at that.